The fog that morning didn't just hide the English countryside, it was thick enough to hide a crime or a heartbreak. Alicia thought she had been careful. She had greased the hinges of the servants' door, wrapped her boots in wool to muffle her steps, and timed her escape to the rhythm of the changing guard. She thought she was a ghost slipping out of a nightmare. But she forgot one thing. The Duke of Blackwood didn't sleep. And when she turned the final bend of the driveway, heart pounding in her throat, she realized that freedom wasn't waiting for her. He was. And he was smiling. The grandfather clock in the hallway of Blackwood Manor struck 4. The sound was usually a comfort, a rhythmic heartbeat of the massive estate. But tonight, to Alicia Vance, it sounded like a judge's gavel. Alicia stood in the center of her small room on the 3rd floor. Her hands were trembling so violently she struggled to fasten the buttons of her traveling coat. It was a dull grey wool, chosen specifically to blend into the shadows of the dawn. She looked around the room one last time. It was a stark space, but it had been her sanctuary for 6 months. 6 months of lies. 6 months of falling in love with a man who could destroy her with a single word. On the small writing desk lay a letter. She had rewritten it 5 times. "My lord, forgive me. I am not who you think I am. Do not look for me." It was pathetic. It was insufficient. But it was the only truth she could afford to leave behind. Alicia grabbed her carpet bag. It was light. She was taking nothing the Duke had given her. No silk ribbons, no leather-bound books, and certainly not the emerald pendant he had placed around her neck 2 nights ago at the harvest ball. A pendant that burned against her skin like a brand. She had left it on the pillow of her bed. She moved to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. Silence. The servants wouldn't rise for another hour. The scullery maid, Martha, was a heavy sleeper, and the butler, Mr. Henderson, was deaf in one ear. Her only obstacle was the hounds, but she had spent weeks feeding them scraps of bacon from her pockets. They knew her scent. They wouldn't bark. Alicia opened the door. The corridor was swallowed in darkness, lit only by the faint, ghostly moonlight filtering through the high windows. She moved like a phantom, stepping on the edges of the floorboards where the wood was less likely to creak. Every breath felt like a scream in her chest. Why am I running? The question pestered her, even though she knew the answer. She was running because staying meant watching him die. She reached the service staircase. It was narrow and steep, smelling of beeswax and old damp stone. As she descended, her mind flashed back to the conversation she had overheard 3 days ago in the library. Not meant for her ears. Never meant for her ears. The arsenic is slow, Thorn, but effective. By winter, the title will be vacant. The voice had belonged to Lord Calloway, the Duke's own cousin, and Alicia, the timid governess, the nobody from London, had been paralyzed behind the velvet curtains. She should have told Sebastian immediately. She should have run to him. But she couldn't. Because Lord Calloway had seen her. He hadn't spoken, he had just held up a piece of paper, a debt note with her father's signature on it. "Leave, Miss Vance," Calloway had mouthed silently, "or your father hangs for his debts, and the Duke dies painfully. Leave, and I grant him a quick end." It was a twisted, impossible choice. But Alicia Vance was a coward. She chose flight. She chose to remove herself from the equation, hoping that her absence would somehow appease the monster in the shadows. She reached the ground floor. The heavy oak side door was bolted. Her fingers slipped on the cold iron as she slid the bolt back. Clack! The sound echoed like a gunshot. She froze, counting to 10. Nothing stirred. She slipped out into the biting cold of the Yorkshire morning. The mist was heavy, clinging to her skin, tasting of wet earth and decaying leaves. She didn't look back at the towering silhouette of Blackwood Manor. She couldn't bear to think of Sebastian sleeping in the master wing, his dark hair messy against the white pillows, unaware that the woman he had kissed in the rose garden was fleeing like a thief. She walked fast, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. The main gate was a mile away. If she could reach the village of Thornton by 6, she could catch the milk train to London. From there, she would disappear. The mist swirled around her, disorienting and thick. She kept her head down, counting her steps. 1,000, 2,000. She reached the perimeter of the estate, where the manicured gardens gave way to the wild, unruly heath. The stone pillars of the east gate loomed ahead, grey giants in the fog. Freedom. It was right there. She took a step forward, and then she stopped. A sound cut through the damp air. Not the wind, not a bird, the distinct rhythmic snort of a horse. Alicia froze. The fog shifted slightly, and a figure emerged from the grey nothingness. He wasn't riding. He was standing in the centre of the path, leaning casually against the flank of a massive black stallion. He was wearing his riding coat, the collar turned up against the chill. He didn't look like a man who had been woken from sleep. He looked like a man who had been waiting. Sebastian Thorne, the Duke of Blackwood, lit a match. The small flame flared, illuminating the sharp angles of his face, the scar that ran through his left eyebrow, and eyes that were darker than the night around them. He brought the flame to a cheroot, inhaled deeply, and then looked at her. "You're late, Alicia," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I expected you at 3. Alicia's bag slipped from her numb fingers and hit the dirt with a dull thud. "Your Grace," she whispered. The title felt absurd in the middle of the woods at dawn. Sebastian didn't move toward her. He simply watched her, the smoke from his cheroot swirling into the mist. "Your Grace," he repeated, a dry, humourless chuckle escaping his lips. "2 nights ago, when I held you against the wall of the library, you called me Sebastian. I preferred that." I have to go," Alicia stammered, stepping back. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought she might faint. "Please don't stop me." "Stop you?" Sebastian pushed off the horse and took a slow, predatory step toward her. "Alicia, look at me. Am I carrying a weapon? Are my guards surrounding you?" He spread his hands wide. He was unarmed. But Sebastian Thorne didn't need a weapon to be dangerous. He possessed an intellect that could dissect a person's soul and a presence that demanded submission. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I know you," he said softly. He closed the distance between them until he was looming over her. She could smell the tobacco, the leather, and the faint, clean scent of sandalwood soap that was uniquely him. "I know that you pace when you are anxious. I know you bite your lower lip when you are lying. And I know that you have been packing that bag in your mind for 3 days." Alicia's breath hitched. "You knew?" "I am a duke, Alicia. I own half the county. Do you think a mouse moves in my house without me knowing?" His voice dropped an octave, losing its mockery. "Why are you running?" "I received word. My father is ill." She lied. It was the rehearsed lie. Sebastian reached out, his gloved hand tilting her chin up, forcing her to look into his eyes. Liar. The word wasn't an accusation. It was a caress. "My father. Your father is currently in a tavern in London, drinking away the money he borrowed from a loan shark. He is in perfect health," Sebastian interrupted. "Try again." Alicia pulled away, panic rising. "You don't understand. I am not good for you. I am a distraction, a liability. Is that what Calloway told you?" The name hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Alicia gasped, her eyes widening. Sebastian's expression hardened. The playfulness vanished, replaced by the cold, ruthless look of the aristocrat who had ruled these lands for a decade. "Did you think I was deaf or just stupid? I know my cousin covets my title. I know he cornered you in the library." "If you know," Alicia began, tears finally spilling over, "then you know he will kill you. He has a debt note. He said if I didn't leave, he'd expose my father and then kill me," Sebastian finished for her. He sounded bored by the prospect of his own murder. "Poison, was it? Arsenic in the port wine?" Alicia stared at him, stunned. You know about the poison?" "I swapped the decanters 2 weeks ago," Sebastian said casually. "Calloway has been poisoning a very expensive potted fern in the corner of my study. It's looking rather wilted, actually." He laughed, but Alicia couldn't join him. She felt her knees give way. The relief was so intense, it was physically painful. She stumbled, and Sebastian caught her instantly. His arms went around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. The heat of his body seeped through her coat, grounding her. "You foolish, wonderful woman," he murmured into her hair. "You were going to sacrifice yourself. Wander into the streets of London with no money, just to save me." "I couldn't let him hurt you," she sobbed into his coat. "So you decided to break my heart instead?" Sebastian's voice was fierce now. He pulled back slightly, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Did it occur to you that I might prefer to face 1,000 assassins than to wake up and find you gone?" Alicia looked up at him. The morning light was just beginning to bleed through the fog, turning the grey to a soft, bruised purple. For the first time, she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. He hadn't slept either. "I am just a governess, Sebastian. You are a duke. Calloway has leverage. My father's debt." "I bought your father's debt yesterday morning," Sebastian said. "I own it, and I burned it." Alicia's mouth fell open. But that was thousands of pounds." "A small price to pay for the woman who keeps my soul intact," he said. "Now, we have a choice, Alicia." He gestured to the open road behind her. "You can continue walking. You can go to the station, take the train, and I will let you go if that is truly what you wish. If you simply do not love me, walk away." He paused, and for a second the mighty Duke looked vulnerable. "But if you are leaving only to protect me, then you get on that horse with me. We ride back to the manor. We walk through the front door, and we finish this game with Calloway together." Alicia looked at the misty road that led to a lonely, safe life. Then she looked at the man who had bought her father's debt and swapped his own poison. "He's still in the house," Alicia whispered. "Calloway." "He is," Sebastian nodded. "Breakfast is served at 8. I intend to be there. Will you join me?" Alicia reached out and took his hand. It was warm and strong. "I'm not dressed for breakfast. I'm wearing my traveling wool." Sebastian smirked, the devilish light returning to his eyes. "Then we'd best ride fast. I imagine you'll want to change into the red silk gown. It's the colour of war, isn't it?" The ride back to Blackwood Manor was not the romantic canter one might read about in penny novels. It was tense. Sebastian pulled Alicia up in front of him on the saddle, his arms caging her in. He didn't speak, but his body was rigid, a coiled spring ready to snap. As the manor came back into view, the sun had fully risen. The house looked different now. When she had left an hour ago, it was a prison she was escaping. Now, it was a battlefield she was voluntarily entering. Groomsmen ran out as they approached the stables. They looked shocked to see the Duke riding in from the woods at dawn with the governess in his arms, but they were too well trained to say a word. Sebastian dismounted first, then reached up to help Alicia down. He didn't release her hand even after her feet touched the cobblestones. "Head high, Alicia," he commanded softly. "If you look guilty, they will devour you. If you look like you own the place, they will step aside." They entered through the main hall. The house was awake now. Maids were dusting the banisters. Footmen were carrying silver trays. The activity stopped instantly as the couple entered. Mr. Henderson, the butler, approached, his face a mask of confusion. "Your Grace? Miss Vance? We found Miss Vance's room empty. We were about to organize a search party." "No need, Henderson," Sebastian said, his voice booming off the marble walls. "Miss Vance and I were merely taking a morning ride, discussing the future of her employment." He squeezed Alicia's hand. "Is my cousin up?" "Lord Calloway is in the breakfast room, Your Grace. He has been asking for you." "Excellent." Sebastian turned to Alicia. "Go upstairs. Change. Take your time. I want you to make an entrance." Alicia hesitated. "He's dangerous, Sebastian. If he realizes you know—" "He won't realize until it's too late," Sebastian promised. "Go." Alicia ran up the stairs, her heart racing. She tore off the grey wool coat and the sensible boots. She washed the tears and the mud from her face. She opened her wardrobe. There, hanging in the back, was the dress Sebastian had mentioned. It wasn't red silk, that had been his joke, but a deep crimson velvet. It was bold. Too bold for a governess. She put it on. She pinned her hair up sharply. She fastened the emerald pendant around her neck. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the frightened girl who had tried to sneak out the side door. She saw a woman who was done running. Downstairs, the atmosphere in the breakfast room was suffocating. Lord Calloway sat at the head of the table, a seat usually reserved for the Duke. He was a handsome man, in a slimy, polished way. He was buttering a piece of toast with deliberate precision. When Sebastian walked in, Calloway didn't jump. He just smiled. "Cousin!" Calloway exclaimed. "I was worried. The servant said your bed hadn't been slept in, and the little governess is missing. A scandal in the making?" Sebastian walked to the sideboard and poured himself a cup of coffee. He didn't sit. He leaned against the mantelpiece, watching Calloway. "No scandal, Arthur," Sebastian said. "Just a morning walk. The air clears the head, helps one see things clearly." Calloway paused, his knife hovering over the toast. "And what did you see?" "Weeds," Sebastian said cryptically. "I noticed that no matter how much you prune a garden, some weeds just keep trying to strangle the roses. It makes one want to pull them out by the root." Calloway's smile faltered. "You speak in riddles this morning." "Do I?" Sebastian took a sip of coffee. "How is the port these days, Arthur? I noticed you haven't touched it." The room went deadly silent. The tick-tock of the clock seemed deafening. "I prefer brandy," Calloway said, his voice tight. "Pity," Sebastian mused. "I had a bottle sent up from the cellar, a special vintage. I was hoping we could toast." "Toast to what?" "To long life," Sebastian smiled, "and to failed plans." At that moment, the double door swung open. Alicia stood there. The crimson velvet caught the morning light, making her look like a queen. She walked into the room, her chin held high, ignoring the gasp from the maid in the corner. She walked straight to the table. She didn't sit in her usual spot at the far end. She walked to the chair at Sebastian's right hand, the chair of the lady of the house. She pulled it out and sat down. "Good morning, Lord Calloway," Alicia said, her voice steady. "I believe you dropped something in the library the other day." She reached into her bodice and pulled out a piece of paper. It wasn't the debt note. Sebastian had that. It was a handkerchief Calloway had used to wipe his brow while threatening her. It was monogrammed with his initials. She placed it on the table. Calloway looked from the handkerchief to Alicia, and then to Sebastian, who was watching her with undisguised pride. "It seems," Calloway hissed, standing up, "that the little mouse has teeth." "She does." Sebastian pushed off the mantelpiece, his hand finally dropping to the hilt of the small dagger he kept concealed in his waistband. "And she is under my protection. So, Arthur, shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? Or shall I send for the constable?" The silence in the breakfast room following Sebastian's ultimatum was heavy enough to crush bones. Lord Arthur Calloway stood by the table, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of the mahogany chair. He looked at the handkerchief Alicia had placed on the table, the damning evidence of his threats in the library, and then he looked at the Duke's hand resting on the hilt of his dagger. For a moment, it seemed Calloway would lunge. The violence in his eyes was naked, ugly, and raw. But Arthur Calloway was a man who survived by wits, not muscle. The tension in his shoulders dropped, and a slow, oily smile spread across his face. "The constable?" Calloway laughed, though it sounded more like a bark. "You think you can call the constable on me, Sebastian? On your own blood?" "I think the magistrate will be very interested in the arsenic found in your quarters, Arthur," Sebastian replied, his voice devoid of emotion, "and the testimony of Miss Vance regarding your extortion." Calloway picked up the handkerchief and dusted an invisible speck of lint from his lapel. "You have it all wrong, cousin. I wasn't poisoning you." He began to pace around the table, his eyes locking onto Alicia. "I was merely medicating you. Everyone knows the Blackwood blood runs hot. Madness runs in our family, doesn't it? Your father had it. And lately you've been so erratic, obsessed with a common governess, paralyzed by moods." Calloway stopped behind Alicia's chair. Sebastian took a step forward, the dagger sliding an inch from its sheath, the metal rasping against leather. "Get away from her," Sebastian growled. "I'm just saying," Calloway continued, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, "that if the constable comes, I won't be the one they arrest. They'll see a duke who has lost his mind, seduced a servant girl, and is now fabricating paranoia about his loyal cousin to hide his own incompetence. Who holds the power of attorney when you are declared unfit, Sebastian?" "I do." It was a terrifying gamble. Calloway was twisting reality, using Sebastian's own reputation for being reclusive and brooding against him. Alicia felt a chill race down her spine. In this era, a claim of insanity was a death sentence for a man's freedom. Alicia stood up. The screech of her chair against the floorboards cut through Calloway's monologue. "He is not mad," Alicia said, her voice ringing clear and sharp. "And you are not loyal." She turned to face the door where the servants were huddled, listening in terror. "Mr. Henderson," she called out. The butler stepped forward, trembling slightly. "Yes, miss?" "Did you or did you not find a receipt from the apothecary in London in Lord Calloway's waste bin last week? A receipt for rat poison?" Calloway froze. He hadn't known about the receipt. Mr. Henderson straightened his back. He looked at Calloway, a man who had treated the staff like dirt for years, and then at the Duke, who had just ridden through the dawn to save a governess. Loyalty, it seemed, was a simple choice. "I did, Miss Vance," Henderson said gravely. "I have it locked in the pantry safe, along with the bottle found under Lord Calloway's mattress." Calloway's face drained of color. The insanity defense crumbled instantly against physical evidence. Sebastian didn't smile. He simply walked over to the bell pull and tugged it violently. "Guard!" he roared. Two burly groundskeepers burst into the room. "Escort my cousin to the root cellar," Sebastian ordered. "Lock him in. The constable arrives at noon." As the men grabbed Calloway by the arms, the veneer of the gentleman cracked completely. He thrashed, knocking over a crystal vase. "You fool!" Calloway screamed, spit flying from his lips as they dragged him toward the door. "You think I'm the problem? You think I'm the one you should fear? I was just the executioner, Sebastian. I didn't sign the death warrant." Sebastian signaled for the men to pause. He walked up to his cousin, his face inches from Calloway's. "What does that mean?" Calloway grinned, a jagged, desperate look. "Check the deed, Sebastian. Check the original land grant for Blackwood. You're sitting on a throne that doesn't belong to you, and she—" He jerked his head toward Alicia. "She's the one who's going to burn it all down." "Take him away," Sebastian commanded, turning his back. The doors slammed shut, leaving Alicia and Sebastian alone in the wreckage of the breakfast room. The adrenaline that had sustained Alicia suddenly vanished, leaving her knees weak. She grabbed the edge of the table for support. Sebastian was there in an instant. He didn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He held her so tightly it almost hurt, as if he were trying to physically fuse her to him, so she could never slip away at dawn again. "He's gone," Sebastian whispered against her skin. "It's over." "Is it?" Alicia asked, pulling back to look at him. What did he mean about the deed? And why did he say I would burn it down? Sebastian brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. His eyes were dark, troubled. "The ramblings of a desperate man, Alicia. He wanted to hurt us one last time. Forget him." But as Sebastian kissed her, a desperate, consuming kiss that tasted of coffee and fear, Alicia couldn't shake the feeling that Arthur Calloway hadn't been lying. The serpent had been caught, but the poison was still in the veins of Blackwood Manor. 3 days passed. The scandal of Lord Calloway's arrest was the talk of the county. The constable had taken him away in chains, raving about stolen birthrights and impostors. Sebastian had thrown himself into the management of the estate, working 18 hours a day to undo the financial damage Calloway had secretly caused. Alicia, meanwhile, found herself in a strange limbo. She was no longer a governess. Sebastian wouldn't hear of her teaching lessons or mending clothes. But she wasn't yet the Duchess. She was the woman the Duke loved, living in his house without a ring on her finger. It was a precarious position, and the whispers of the staff, though not malicious, were constant. But her mind wasn't on propriety. It was on Calloway's final words. Check the deed. On the 4th afternoon, while Sebastian was meeting with his tenant farmers, Alicia entered the library. It was a massive 2-story room filled with the smell of old paper and dust. She went straight to the archive section, where the family history was kept. She didn't know what she was looking for. The Blackwood lineage was ancient, stretching back 300 years. She pulled down the heavy leather tome marked Land Grants and Lineage, 1750, 1850. She spent hours turning the brittle pages. Nothing seemed amiss. The title passed from father to son, unbroken. Then she found an entry from 1860, Sebastian's grandfather's era. There was a notation in the margin, written in faded ink. The dispute regarding the Hollow Creek lands resolved. Payment made to the Vance family. Deed transferred. Alicia stopped breathing. Vance. That was her name. She had always known her family was poor. Her father was a failed merchant, a gambler. She had never heard of them owning land, certainly not land connected to the wealthy Blackwood estate. She dug deeper, pulling out a box of loose correspondence from that year. Her hands shook as she found a letter addressed to the old Duke. "My lord, I cannot accept the money. The land is my daughter's birthright. You stole the water rights, and now you try to buy my silence. If anything happens to me, look to the child. The letter was signed Thomas Vance, her grandfather. Alicia sat back, the room spinning. The Hollow Creek lands mentioned in the ledger were the most valuable part of the Blackwood estate, where the iron mines were located, the source of the Duke's immense wealth. If the transfer was fraudulent, if her grandfather had been coerced or the deed forged, then technically the mines belonged to her family. To her. "Searching for ghosts, Alicia?" She gasped and slammed the book shut. Sebastian was standing in the doorway. He looked exhausted, mud splattered on his riding boots, his cravat undone. But his eyes were sharp. Alicia stood up, trying to hide the letter behind her back. "I was just reading." Sebastian walked into the room slowly. The warmth that usually filled his gaze when he looked at her was dimmed by suspicion. Calloway's words stuck with you. "They didn't make sense," Alicia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wanted to prove him wrong." "And did you?" Sebastian stopped across the desk from her. He looked down at the closed ledger. "Or did you find something you didn't want to see?" "Sebastian, my name is in this book," she whispered. "My grandfather. He claimed your grandfather stole the land where the mines are." Sebastian closed his eyes and let out a long, weary sigh. He didn't look surprised. "I know." The silence that followed was deafening. "You know?" Alicia's voice cracked. "How long?" "Since I took the title," Sebastian said. "My father confessed it on his deathbed. The deed to the mines was never legally signed over. Your grandfather refused to sell." "My grandfather. He had connections. He had the records altered. He destroyed your family's business to force them into poverty so they couldn't fight back in court." Alicia felt sick. The man she loved, the man who had just saved her from a debt, was living on a fortune stolen from her own blood. "And you said nothing? When Calloway threatened my father with debt, that debt was nothing compared to what you owe us." "I intended to fix it," Sebastian said, his voice pleading now. He walked around the desk, reaching for her, but she stepped back. "Alicia, why do you think I hired you? Why do you think I brought you here?" The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. "You hired me out of guilt? I wasn't chosen because I was a good teacher. I was a charity case? A way to soothe your conscience? No." Sebastian grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight. "At first, yes. I wanted to see if I could help the Vance family without exposing the scandal. But then I met you. I heard you laugh in the garden. I watched you debate history with me at dinner. I fell in love with you, Alicia. That was never part of the plan." "But you kept the secret," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You let me think I was nothing, while you sat on my inheritance." "I was going to give it all to you," Sebastian shouted, the raw emotion breaking through his reserve. "Why do you think I want to marry you? Not just for love, though God knows I worship you. If you are the Duchess, the land is yours anyway. It unites the claim. It fixes the sin of the past without destroying my family name." Alicia stared at him. It was a pragmatic, aristocratic solution. Marry the girl, hide the crime, secure the fortune. "Is that what this is?" she asked quietly. "A merger?" "Don't insult me," Sebastian warned, his eyes flashing dangerous fire. "I rode through the dawn for you. I was ready to kill my own cousin for you. Do not tell me that is business." "It's not business, Sebastian," she said, pulling away from his touch. "It's a lie. You built a foundation on a lie." She turned and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "I don't know," Alicia said, not looking back. But I can't stay in this room with you right now. She left him standing in the shadows of his ancestors, the weight of the stolen gold crushing the air between them. The rift between them was a cold, silent chasm. For 2 days, Alicia stayed in her room, refusing to dine with the Duke. Sebastian, prideful and hurt, did not beg. He left flowers at her door, white roses, her favorite. But no notes. The tension was broken by the arrival of a carriage bearing the crest of the royal court. It wasn't the police. It was an invitation. Actually, it was a summons. The Duchess of Claridge, Sebastian's formidable aunt, Lady Margaret, was hosting her annual autumn ball, and she had specifically requested the presence of the Duke of Blackwood and his guest. To refuse Lady Margaret was social suicide. Furthermore, it was the perfect stage for Sebastian to cement his standing after the Calloway scandal. If he appeared strong, the rumors would die. If he hid, the vultures would circle. Alicia found a dress box on her bed the morning of the ball. Inside was a gown of midnight blue silk, trimmed with silver lace, and a note in Sebastian's bold scrawl, "We can fight about the past later. Tonight, we must survive the present. Please. S." She put on the dress. She was angry, yes, hurt, deeply. But she loved him. And she knew that if the truth about the land theft came out publicly, Sebastian would be ruined. He would lose everything. Despite his lies, she couldn't bear to see him destroyed. The carriage ride to Claridge Hall was silent. Sebastian looked regal in his formal attire, but the circles under his eyes told the truth of his sleepless nights. When they arrived, the ballroom was a sea of diamonds and judgment. All eyes turned to them. The Duke of Blackwood, dark and imposing, with the unknown woman on his arm. They moved through the crowd, a united front. Sebastian's hand on her waist was possessive, protective. "Smile, Alicia," he whispered. "They smell fear." "I'm not afraid of them," she whispered back. "I'm afraid of what happens when the music stops." They were approached by Lady Margaret. She was a woman of 60, encased in purple velvet, with eyes like hawk. "Sebastian," she inclined her head. "And this must be the famous Miss Vance." "Your Grace," Alicia curtsied deep. "You have caused quite a stir, my dear," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Arthur Calloway is raving in his cell about you. He claims you are a usurper." "Arthur is unwell, Aunt," Sebastian cut in sharply. "Is he?" Margaret tapped her fan against her chin. "He sent me a letter, Sebastian. From prison. He details a very interesting story about a land deed." The blood drained from Sebastian's face. "Come with me," Margaret commanded. "Both of you. The study." Once the heavy oak doors of the study were closed, the music of the ball faded to a dull thrum. Margaret turned on them, her face devoid of warmth. "Is it true?" she demanded. "Is this girl the Vance heiress?" "It is a misunderstanding," Sebastian began. "Stop lying," Margaret snapped. "I checked the records myself this morning. The Vances own the mines. Legally, this girl owns half your income, Sebastian." Margaret turned her cold eyes on Alicia. She walked closer, inspecting her like a prize horse. "You have a choice, Miss Vance," Margaret said. "You can take this to the courts. You will win. You will be the richest woman in Yorkshire, and Sebastian will be a pauper, stripped of his title for fraud. Is that what you want?" "I never asked for the money," Alicia said softly. "I only wanted the truth." "The truth is a luxury we cannot afford," Margaret hissed. She reached into a reticule and pulled out a checkbook. "I am prepared to offer you £50,000. You will take it. You will leave England tonight. You will go to America and never speak the name Blackwood again." Sebastian stepped in front of Alicia. "She is not going anywhere. She must Margaret shouted. "She is a liability. As long as she is here, she is a walking bomb waiting to blow up this family." "Then let it blow up," Sebastian roared. The raw power of his voice shook the room. "I don't care about the mines, Aunt. I don't care about the money. Let her take it all. I will live in a cottage if I have to, but I will not lose her." He turned to Alicia, grabbing her hands. "Alicia, take the land. Sign the papers tomorrow. I will sign it all over to you. I surrender. Just don't leave me." Alicia looked at him. She saw the desperation, the absolute truth in his eyes. He was offering to give up his empire for her. The guilt of the past wasn't his. It was his grandfather's. But he was willing to pay the price. She looked at Lady Margaret, who stood with her checkbook, representing the cold, transactional world of the aristocracy. Then she looked at Sebastian, the man who had lit a match in the fog to find her. Alicia took the checkbook from Margaret's hand. Margaret smiled triumphantly. "Wise girl." Alicia ripped the check in half, then she ripped it again, letting the confetti fall onto the Persian rug. "I don't want your money," Alicia said calmly. "And I don't want the mines. I want the man." She turned to Sebastian. "I don't need a deed to know where I belong." Sebastian let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He pulled her into a kiss that was fierce and reclaiming. "How touching," Margaret sneered. "But love doesn't bury legal documents. Calloway knows. He will talk." "Calloway has been dealt with." A deep voice came from the shadows of the corner. They all turned. A man in a dark suit stepped forward. It was the High Magistrate, Sir Thomas. "I have been listening," Sir Thomas said. "I was invited by the Duke to overhear this conversation." Margaret gasped. "A trap? You set a trap for your own aunt?" Alicia looked at Sebastian in shock. "I needed a witness," Sebastian said grimly. "I knew Margaret was communicating with Calloway. I knew she would try to bribe you." Sir Thomas nodded. "Lady Margaret, attempting to bribe a witness and conceal a fraud is a serious offence. However, since Miss Vance has just verbally relinquished her claim to the estate in the presence of a magistrate, the matter of the fraud is technically settled. The mines belong to the Blackwood estate by default of her refusal." He looked at Alicia with respect. "You just gave away a fortune, young lady." "I bought a future," Alicia corrected him. "However," Sebastian interrupted, his voice hard as steel, "my aunt has conspired to blackmail us. She will be leaving England. Tonight." Margaret's face went white. "You wouldn't." "The packet steamer leaves for France at dawn," Sebastian said, echoing the time Alicia had once tried to leave. "Be on it, or the magistrate will arrest you for conspiracy alongside Calloway." Margaret looked at the three of them, the Duke, the governess, and the law. She knew she had lost. With a swirl of purple velvet, she stormed out of the room without a word. When the heavy oak doors finally closed behind Lady Margaret, the silence that descended upon the study was absolute. The air still vibrated with the toxicity of her presence. But the threat was gone. Alicia stood by the fireplace, her chest heaving slightly. The pieces of the torn cheque, £50,000, a fortune that could have bought her a castle in France, lay scattered on the Persian rug like confetti. Sir Thomas, the High Magistrate, cleared his throat. He was a man of stone and law, not easily moved. But he looked at Alicia with a gaze that held something rare. Reverence. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice grave. "I must ask you for the record, one final time. Do you understand what you have just done? By destroying that cheque and verbally renouncing your claim in my presence, you have effectively cemented the Blackwood title and lands to the Duke. There is no going back. If you walk out of this room and he casts you aside, you will have nothing." Sebastian moved before Alicia could answer. He didn't speak to the magistrate. He walked straight to Alicia. He looked shattered. The arrogance of the Duke was gone, replaced by the raw vulnerability of a man who had just watched someone jump in front of a bullet for him. "Why?" Sebastian whispered, his voice cracking. He reached out, his fingers hovering over her cheek as if afraid she might vanish. "Alicia, why? You could have destroyed me. You should have destroyed me. My family stole your future." Alicia looked up into his eyes. They were the same dark, stormy eyes she had seen in the mist that morning. She tried to run away. But now, the fog was gone. "I didn't want a future that was bought with vengeance, Sebastian," she said softly. "And I didn't want a fortune that cost me my heart. Your grandfather's sins are not yours, but your penance, the way you tried to protect me, even from yourself, that is yours." She took his hand and pressed it to her chest. "I told you on the road," she continued, "I am not afraid of poverty. I am afraid of a life without love. I chose the life I wanted." Sebastian closed his eyes and let out a shuddering breath, pulling her forehead against his. "Then I swear to you," he vowed, his voice low and fierce, "I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving that you made the right bargain." Sir Thomas closed his ledger with a decisive thud. "Then it is settled. The inquiry into the Blackwood deed is closed. I shall remove the records of the dispute from the archives tonight. As far as history is concerned, the transfer was legitimate." He picked up his hat. "Your Grace, future Duchess." He bowed low to Alicia. "You have a formidable woman, Sebastian. I suggest you marry her before she realizes she has more sense than you." The carriage ride home. The ride back to Blackwood Manor was unlike the tense journey of the morning. The moon was high now, casting a silver glow over the passing hedgerows. Inside the carriage, Sebastian didn't sit across from her. He sat beside her, his arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. For a long time, the only sound was the rhythmic clatter of the horse's hooves and the beating of Sebastian's heart beneath her ear. "I was terrified," Sebastian admitted into the darkness. "When Margaret pulled out that check, I thought you would take it. I thought finally, she sees me for the fraud I am." "You are not a fraud," Alicia murmured. "I felt like one," he confessed. "Every time I looked at the mines, every time I signed a ledger, I felt the weight of that theft. I thought the only way to fix it was to trick you into marrying me, to merge the lines so the crime would disappear." He tightened his hold on her. "But somewhere between the library and the rose garden, the plan died. I didn't want to marry the heiress. I wanted to marry Alicia. And that terrified me more, because if I told you the truth, I knew you would leave, and I couldn't breathe the air in that house without you in it." Alicia lifted her head, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You tried to bear it all alone. Calloway, the debt, the poison, the deed. You treat the world like a burden you must carry." "It is the duty of a duke," he said automatically. "No," Alicia corrected him gently. "It is the duty of a lonely man. You are not lonely anymore, Sebastian. We carry it together now." Sebastian caught her hand and kissed her palm, a gesture so intimate it made her shiver. "Together," he echoed. "I like the sound of that." The proposal. They didn't go inside immediately when the carriage pulled up to the manor. The servants were asleep. The great house was dark and silent, standing tall against the starry sky. Sebastian led her not to the front door, but around the side, through the iron gates of the garden, past the dormant fountains, to the old stone folly where they had first spoken as anything more than master and servant. The moonlight turned the stone to silver. The air was cold, crisp with the coming winter, but Alicia felt warm. Sebastian stopped and turned to her. He reached into his coat pocket. He didn't pull out a ring box. He pulled out a key. It was old, rusted iron. "This," Sebastian said, holding it up, "is the key to the original vault in the cellar, the one my grandfather sealed shut." He took her hand and placed the heavy, cold metal into her palm. "Inside that vault is the original Vance family crest, carved in wood, which my grandfather stripped from the farmhouse before he burned it down. I found it years ago. I kept it, hoping one day I could return it." He knelt. It wasn't the fluid, graceful motion of a courtier, but the heavy, solemn kneel of a man offering his soul. "Alicia Vance, you have given up a fortune for me. I cannot give you back the years your family lost, but I can give you the future. I can give you this house, this name, and every beat of my heart until it stops." He looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't have a ring tonight. I didn't think I would be worthy to ask you. But if you will have me, if you will take this broken, complicated man, I will make you the happiest woman in England. Will you marry me?" Alicia looked at the rusted key in her hand, a symbol of his regret and his respect for her history. It was worth more than any diamond. "I don't need a ring, Sebastian," she whispered, dropping to her knees in the grass so she was level with him. She cupped his face in her hands. "Yes, I will marry you. I will marry the man, not the Duke." He kissed her then, and it wasn't a desperate kiss of farewell like the ones before. It was a promise. It was slow, deep, and filled with a terrifying amount of hope. Under the moonlight, in the shadow of the house that had once been her enemy, Alicia Vance claimed her victory. The foundation of trust. The wedding, 2 weeks later, was small. It scandalized the local gentry who expected a grand affair at the cathedral. Instead, Alicia and Sebastian were married in the private chapel on the estate, with only the staff and the tenants as witnesses. Mr. Henderson, the butler, cried openly. But the real work began the day after the wedding. Sebastian had summoned his lawyers and architects to the great hall. Large tables were set up, covered in blueprints and ledgers. Alicia stood at the head of the table, Sebastian at her side. "Gentlemen," Sebastian announced, his voice commanding the room, "there are to be changes in the management of the Blackwood estate, specifically regarding the revenue from the Hollow Creek mines." The lawyers exchanged nervous glances. They knew the rumors. "The profits from the mines," Sebastian continued, "will no longer go into the ducal coffers. They will be diverted, 100%, into a new trust." He turned to Alicia. She stepped forward, smoothing the skirts of her simple green wool dress. She looked every inch the Duchess, not because of her jewels, but because of her purpose. "We are establishing the Vance Blackwood Foundation," Alicia said clearly. "The money will be used to build 3 new schools for the tenant families, a clinic in the village of Thornton, and a fund to pay off the debts of farmers who have suffered bad harvests." A gasp went through the room. This was radical. It was unheard of. "But Your Grace," one of the lawyers stammered, That is a fortune. You are giving away the most profitable part of the estate." "It is not a gift," Sebastian cut in, his eyes hard. "It is a repayment. That land has a debt attached to it. This is how we pay it." He looked at Alicia, and his expression softened into pride. "My wife believes that nobility is defined by what you give, not what you keep. And I find that I agree with her." Alicia placed her hand on the blueprints. "Build the school first," she ordered. "I want the children in it by winter." Epilogue. 1 year later, October 14th, 1888. The dawn was breaking over Yorkshire. The mist was there, as always, a thick blanket of white that obscured the world. Alicia stood on the terrace, wrapped in Sebastian's heavy riding coat, watching the sun burn through the grey. It was the anniversary. Exactly 1 year ago, she had crept down the service stairs with a carpet bag, trying to disappear into this very fog. She heard the door open behind her. She didn't turn. She knew the rhythm of his steps. Sebastian wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. He was warm, solid, and real. "You're up early," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "I was just thinking," Alicia said, leaning back into him, "about the girl who ran away. She was so scared. She thought she was saving you." "She did save me," Sebastian said, kissing the side of her neck. "She saved me from becoming my grandfather. She saved me from becoming Calloway." He turned her around to face him. He looked tired. The baby had kept them both up half the night. But he looked happy. The shadows that used to haunt his eyes were gone, banished by a year of light. "How is he?" Alicia asked softly. "Sleeping," Sebastian smiled. "Finally. He has your stubbornness, you know. He refuses to close his eyes until he's ready. He has your temper," Alicia countered with a laugh. "Perhaps," Sebastian conceded, "but he will never have my secrets. That is the promise we made." He looked out over the estate. In the distance, the slate roof of the new school caught the morning light. Smoke was rising from the chimneys of the tenant cottages that were now warm and well-maintained, thanks to the mines. "Do you regret it?" Sebastian asked suddenly, his gaze turning serious. "The money. The £50,000. We could have been in Paris." Alicia looked at the school. She looked at the man who loved her with a ferocity that terrified the world, and she thought of the small boy sleeping in the nursery upstairs, who would grow up knowing that his name meant honor, not theft. "I have everything I ever wanted, Sebastian," she said. "I didn't want a check. I wanted a life, and we built a real one." Sebastian smiled, that rare, true smile that was only for her. "Happy anniversary, Alicia." "Happy anniversary, Sebastian." As the sun finally cleared the mist, illuminating the golden leaves of the autumn trees, the Duke of Blackwood pulled his Duchess close. They stood together, not as a master and servant, not as a debtor and creditor, but as equals. The past was buried in the archives, and the future was wide open, bright and clear as the morning sky. And that brings us to the end of Alicia and Sebastian's journey. From a terrified governess fleeing in the fog to a duchess who rewrote the rules of her world, Alicia proved that the strongest weapon against a dark past is the courage to build a brighter future. I truly hope this story touched you. It's a reminder that love isn't just about romance. It's about making each other better people. I have a question for you all before you go. Sebastian hid the truth about the inheritance because he was afraid Alicia would leave him. Do you think a lie is ever justified if it's done to protect a relationship? Or should the truth always come first, no matter the cost? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this 8,000-word saga, please give this video a thumbs up. It took a lot of coffee to write this one. And make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell turned on, so you don't miss our next dramatic historical romance. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep your hearts open.